Okay, everybody, I want to welcome everyone to the Resident and Family Support Council. And this is Thanksgiving week. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about visiting in the holidays, home for the holidays. And we want to talk about what that's like. This week, we did have some very important visitation policies that came down actually 2 weeks ago from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the federal government. And so Jessica is actually going to talk through that a little bit with us and reminding us of some really basic stuff so that we can make sure that we all keep things heading in the right direction through this pandemic. And then also, I believe Christine Pate, yes, she's on the call as well from Illinois Department of Public Health. And so when we open up to questions between Jessica, Christine, and myself, hopefully, and any other ombudsman out there or anyone else who knows any information, please jump in so we can get your questions answered, because we know how important this is during this holiday season. Just a reminder, if for questions, please post them in the chat. And or if you've got a complicated question or it's too much to type or you're on the phone, you can go ahead and you can unmute yourself or raise your hand and we can call on you that way. We want to make sure that we do get your questions answered. I also want to make sure that everyone is fully aware that the Illinois Pioneer Coalition sponsors this Zoom site for us, and they're a person-centered care organization in the state that promotes person-centered care through education and other support systems for the long-term care community at large. So with that being said, I am going to go ahead and turn this over to Jessica, Jessica is our state ombudsman specialist. So she helps work with us at the ombudsman's office. And so she is a good person to be able to help lead us in this conversation today. Jessica, you want to go ahead and you can take it over.
Sure, thanks, Lee. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So as Lee said, this afternoon, we're going to spend pretty much the next 55 minutes or so talking about visitation. There have been some major changes, some really exciting changes in the visitation guidance for individuals living in nursing homes. The Federal Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, we call that CMS, issued revised guidance stating that nursing homes must allow indoor visitation at all times for all residents. So we're going to get to that in a bit, but I want to cover some basics before we jump to that. So let's see if this is going to work for me. Okay. As excited as we are to have more resident-centered guidance finally, it's really important that we all stay mindful of the basic infection control practices. So one of the most important ways that we can help protect residents in long-term care facilities is to get vaccinated against COVID-19. And currently, I think this is kind of hot off the presses. In Illinois, anyone 18 and over can now get a booster shot as well. So if you got vaccinated and it's been 6 months, we encourage you to go ahead and get the booster as part of all of us doing our part to help protect the residents in long-term care facilities. One of the most important ways that we can help protect those we care about living in long-term care facilities is if we're sick, to not visit. We really need to stay home if we're not feeling well. So if you are sick, you have any symptoms of COVID-19 or really any other respiratory illness, we shouldn't be visiting a long-term care facility. We want to avoid spreading illnesses to individuals that are living in those congregate care settings. And some of the basics, right? We've got to use good hand hygiene. So remember to wash your hands or use a alcohol-based hand rub, wear a mask. In Illinois, all visitors to long-term care facilities are required to wear a mask. If you've read the CMS guidance that we're going to talk about in a little bit, there's some caveats for when masks are required and when masks aren't required. However, while the federal guidance gives those caveats, in Illinois, we have the executive order requiring mask wearing. And so that executive order for wearing a mask is going to be the higher standard that we have to follow. I just attended a webinar hosted by Federal CMS that also had Kira Jacobs-Slivka from CDC, and she talked about the fact that masking may not be possible 100% of the time. And that doesn't mean a visit can't happen. There are residents who may not be able to wear a mask for a health reason. Maybe they have a cognitive issue and aren't able to keep a mask on, or some other reason. That doesn't prevent them from having visitation. So facilities have to be mindful of that and have to work with that to still allow residents to be able to see their friends and family, those that want to come in and spend some time with them. However, I just want to be clear, in general, visitors should wear a mask at all times while they're in the facility, unless eating, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The guidance is pretty clear that visitors shouldn't be wandering through the facility, and that we need to still continue to physically distance from other residents and other groups. Maybe a resident has their loved ones visiting them as well, and the guidance still really strongly urges physical distancing between groups. Visitation opening up also doesn't mean large gatherings, and we'll talk about that in a few slides as well. So this is a screenshot of the CMS guidance. So I have a link there at the bottom of the page, and I think Lee's putting that in the chat for you as well. But just so you know, if for some reason you can't find it, what you need to Google is QSO-3939-NH, QSO-2039-NH, and that should get you a link to come to this guidance. And it's a little confusing because if you look at the guidance, it's dated September 17th, 2020. So it's really important that you look over to the right side of that guidance and see the revised date. So that's going to show you the most recent version of this. Well, we know the most recent version is November 12th, but if you're looking at a version of this that doesn't have that November 12th, 2021 date, you don't have the most up-to-date guidance. So if for some reason you can't, like the link's not working or whatever, reach out to us at the State Ombudsman Office and we will make sure that we get this information to you. It is really important that as we are advocating for visitation rights of residents, that we can hand this to facility staff and show them exactly where in the federal guidance some of these different right provisions are dictated. I want to clarify that right now, as of what time is it? 3:09 p.m. today, we don't have state guidance that broadens visitation for other facility types. So this federal guidance that we see here on the screen only applies to nursing homes that receive federal funding, that are certified. So basically those nursing homes that take Medicare and Medicaid funding. We've heard rumors that guidance from public health could drop even today, but I haven't seen it when I logged into this call. They've worked really hard to try and get it out, and they keep saying soon. So no promises that it's coming today. We heard a rumor it might, but hopefully that guidance that will help align some of this for all the facility types that are licensed in the state of Illinois. That's what we're hoping comes in that other guidance coming from public health, but it hasn't dropped yet. So stay tuned. But what we're going to talk about here is what is in the guidance for nursing homes. So if your loved one is in an assisted living, or maybe you're a resident of assisted living or supportive living or other facility type, hold tight, because I'm encouraged and I'm really hopeful that what we talk about here today with the guidance for nursing homes will soon be applicable to where you live as well. The National Consumer Voice did a great job putting together the nursing home visitation guidance points. That screenshot you see, that's just the first half of the document. It's multiple pages, I don't know, 2 or 3 pages long, but it does a really good job of taking the new revised guidance and just simplifying it, putting bullets of these are the main takeaways. This is the additional guidance provisions. So again, the link's there at the bottom, and Lee will put that in the chat as well. I encourage you, especially if you look at the guidance and it feels overwhelming. I don't know if it's 9 pages, 8 pages, it's a lot. This document does a good job of being comprehensive, but not as overwhelming as the guidance may feel reading it. The other thing I want to note about the guidance is you'll see here in red where it has that bullet point, visitation is now allowed for all residents at all times. The changes in the guidance are put in red italic, so it's easy to see as you skim through it what has changed. So I just want to make mention of that. So some of the main takeaways that we have are, I said it all twice now, I think, facilities must allow indoor visitation at all times for all residents. Facilities can no longer limit the frequency of visits and the length of visits. We just actually the same day that guidance was dropped, we saw a facility policy that was extremely restrictive in the times that it was allowing friends and family to come to the facility to visit residents. And the feds are saying, you can't do that anymore. Another takeaway, vaccinated and unvaccinated residents can have close contact, including touch. Visitors need to be made aware. The facility is obligated to educate visitors of the risk of physical contact with an unvaccinated resident, but the guidance does clarify. The feds have finally acknowledged that this is really important to a person's well-being, their whole person. And so touch is now allowed for both vaccinated and unvaccinated residents. Communal dining and communal activities should be taking place. Core infection control practices should still be adhered to during these activities. And so we need to make sure that doesn't mean, we're all going to be holding hands in a circle without a mask, right? We still have to put some of those protections in place, but group activities and communal dining should be taking place. All of the residents should not still be eating in their rooms. If there's an outbreak for a short period of time, or if a resident's in isolation, there are limited circumstances in which a resident may need to eat in his or her room. But in general, that should be the exception and not the norm for a facility. Visitors are not required to be vaccinated. Visitors should be screened upon entry and they can't come in if they're sick. One thing I want to know, I don't have it on the slide, but I want to make sure to mention is that I know many of you are familiar with essential caregivers, and essential caregivers are likely going to be treated more like staff than a visitor. So they're going to be treated like a staff or volunteer of the facility because they're providing some sort of care, hence the caregiver. And so the vaccination requirement is going to likely look different for an essential caregiver than it would for a general visitor. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. I expect more to come with the guidance from public health. Maybe I'm hopeful that it will delineate that further for us and give us further explanation. But I just want to note it because I know many of you on the call are likely essential caregivers to your loved ones who are living in long-term care. So next we're going to shift, and I just have a few more slides, a handful more slides of some of the frequently asked questions that have been floating around, and in the response either straight from the guidance or the response we've heard from CMS and CDC. So the first one we're going to look at is, can residents and their family members eat a meal together? And the answer to that is yes. The feds say they need to maintain physical distancing from other groups, and masks should be worn when not actively eating, but residents and family members can share a meal together, which I know is really important to many people with the holiday coming up on Thursday. You know, traditions are important to us, and sharing food together and having that experience is important. So the feds have said yes, residents and their family members can share a meal together. Another question, can residents leave the facility? The answer to that is yes. It talks about it in the CMS guidance, and CDC has guidance on what a facility is supposed to do when residents leave and then come back to a facility. So again, as many of you are thinking about meals and going home and coming back, that type of thing, for the holiday, residents do have a right to leave. A facility cannot, a nursing home cannot say, you can't leave this facility. So I want to make sure that that's clear. And again, that is in the guidance. Hey, you might want to use the mute function for, we're picking up some noise, not from you, but if you could check where it's coming from. The next question is, can facilities still schedule visits? If you remember to what I've repeated a couple times, remember we say residents can have visits at all times, and they can't limit the frequency or duration. So this is coming with a little asterisk, I guess, a little caveat is going to come with this bullet point. And it's there on the screen. So CMS says they can structure visitation on Thanksgiving, because essentially if everybody came at noon for lunch to a facility, so if you have 100 residents who all have 2 people coming to see them, suddenly there's 300 people in the building, and the building's not going to be able to allow, there's just not space for social distancing, etc. So they're saying that a facility can structure visitation on Thanksgiving or any major holiday where you're going to have that type of congestion. Now, remember they said that we can share a meal, and I've heard public health talk about be creative. Maybe you don't eat at noon, but maybe you come for breakfast and share breakfast with your loved one. Or maybe as a resident, maybe you're able to spend the evening, your dinner with your family. And while your roommate may have their family there at lunchtime, you know, they're going to need to stagger visits, but every resident should be able to have a visit on Thanksgiving. So while they're saying they can structure visitation, they are not saying that they can limit visitation. So residents still have the right to see their loved ones on Thanksgiving. It just may not look like we would want it to look like, I guess, but it's more than where we started from. To me, this is where the compromise is in this, not really in the guidance so much, but what's coming from Evan Schulman at CMS. He's the one that just was speaking about this. So, and he said, it should be limited to a holiday and not be done regularly. It shouldn't really apply to any other days of the year, is what Evan Schulman from CMS said when he was addressing this specific FAQ. Will we be able to have our traditional family meal at the facility? Again, families should be able to visit and eat with residents, but large group gatherings are discouraged. So if, you know, 3 years ago, the facility that you're familiar with would have all the families there and they do a big buffet and everybody would join, and you'd be all over the facility in the activity room and in the dining room and the staff conference room, and they made a really big deal about it. The feds and public health are saying, don't do that. Figure out how to allow residents to have family meals, but not a large group gathering where everyone is there at the same time. So it may be, again, people there at breakfast, people there at lunch, people there at dinner, maybe every 2 hours they're offering a meal. The other thing that we've heard public health say is that they shouldn't be doing buffet style meals for the holiday meal, but it really needs to be where someone is plating the food and serving it. Can a facility require a visitor to be vaccinated? The answer to that is no. Facilities are encouraged to educate visitors on the vaccination and encourage them to get vaccinated. And they can ask a visitor if they're vaccinated. So they can ask the question, but the visitor doesn't have to answer. And the answer cannot be a condition of visitation. Excuse me. So if you go to visit and they say, are you vaccinated? And you say, no, I'm not vaccinated. They can't say, well, you can't come in. They still have to allow you to visit with the resident. You could also say, I'm not comfortable giving you that information. Or you can say, yes, I'm vaccinated. I mean, you shouldn't lie. You need to give them an honest answer, but you are not required to answer the question. And similar to that is, can a facility require a visitor to be tested? And to that, the answer to that is also no. Facilities should be screening for symptoms. So it's different. They should do a screening to see if you have symptoms of COVID. And if you're symptomatic, you should not be entering the building, but they can't require you to actually do a test, a PCR test or a rapid test. They can't require that test as a condition for entry either. They can offer to do a test for visitors, and visitors, I know many of you have already been doing this, and that's okay, but they can't make it a condition of visitation. It's absolutely a way to help protect the residents living in those buildings, right? If they test the visitors, they can do a rapid test, 15 minutes, you know that it's not showing up that you're positive for COVID. That's some assurance that COVID's not being brought into the building. So I absolutely understand why facilities want to be able to do this and why they offer it for very good reason. But the feds have been very clear that they can offer it, but they cannot require that you're tested to enter. So as we move to open discussion, I just want to, in case anybody joined late, I want to clarify that we're talking about the federal guidance that came from CMS a week ago Friday, not last Friday, but the previous Friday. And that guidance applies to nursing homes. We expect public health to issue new guidance any minute or any day. It might not come today. That will hopefully have similar guidance for all the other licensed facility types that we have in the state of Illinois. But right now, the guidance that we've been discussing only applies to nursing homes. Lee, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Jessica. I really appreciated that information, as I'm sure everybody did. At this time, we're going to open it up for questions. We've got some already in the chat that I'll start monitoring. And I want to invite Christine Pate, who's an infection preventionist. That's a mouthful. An infection preventionist who works with the Illinois Department of Public Health for Illinois, to also open up her camera to see if she could also assist with answering some of these questions. So to start it off, there was one question that was put into the chat asking if assisted living staff are required to wear masks.
Christine, do you want to take it or you want me to?
Sure, I can take that. Hello, everyone. So the question is, are assisted living facilities required to mask?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the answer to that would be yes, per the executive order. Assisted living facilities would fall under that guidance for source control.
Okay, and that goes right along with those infection prevention, all of those things. You know, it was mentioned in the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid call today. They did talk about that we are nowhere near at the place that we're post-pandemic, that we were before the pandemic. We are nowhere near life looking like that was. And I don't know if it's ever really going to go back, because I think we have learned some things through this entire experience that we've been undergoing for over a year and a half now. So, you know, it may become one of those ways of the world where we're going to be seeing a lot more people wearing masks out in the general public, which is not a bad thing. It's made more awareness to all of us to be aware of that hand washing. Most of us that work in long-term care have had this ingrained in our heads about hand washing for years. And so now it's just making more people. I know my family has become a lot more aware of it. And finally, they're like, Mom, maybe you're not as crazy as I always thought you were. Always going to wash your hands all the time after touching surfaces and shaking hands and things like that. Because it is the way really to keep the infection down. But it's wonderful to hear. And I think Jessica and Christine, you will agree, how we're able to touch people now, if they're, if it's feeling a little bit safer, that we can do some of those things and hold my loved one's hand to help give them that encouragement that they need.
Yeah,
Lee,
I would
one
agree
thing
with
that
that.
is in the, oh, go ahead, Christine.
Yep, excuse me. I was just going to add to that, that once we do start to see our transmission, our community transmission decrease, at that point, we should then start to see some of those the masking restrictions start to lift in some of our settings, but we're just not there yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to add that if you look at the CMS guidance, they actually added quite a bit of language where they explain why they feel like they're at a point, the percent of residents who've been vaccinated, why they feel like it can now be, visitation can be done safely. Obviously, there's always risks. There's risks in everything we do, but the guidance, I feel, does a good job in kind of explaining why they've decided to make the shift that they did.
So with that, somebody asked about Christmas parties being allowed, and I know you touched on the holiday events and what that's looking like. And bringing people together in these large groups is still not something that we're comfortable with doing, but we can still have activities. Is that right? So that's so we can be expecting to see people gathering for activities, but we're not going to see things like large Christmas parties, maybe where we have the families invited and things like that. There'll be smaller group events.
Right, absolutely. And a lot of it's going to depend on the space of the actual facility. So if you have a large gathering room, it may be possible to have 12 residents, 15 residents in that room socially or physically distanced. So there's, you have a lot will depend, that physical distancing, that being able to maintain those core infection control practices is what's really important at this point, right? Trying to figure out how can we get everybody together, but do it safely. So everybody may be groups and not really everybody. But again, it's going to be, rather than having 100 residents, can they do, 20 residents and, or, some form of it. So, my heart goes out to the activity directors. They are some of the most creative people I've met in my life. And I think that many of them have found creative ways to continue to connect with residents and connect residents with one another. But this guidance does clearly say that congregate activities are allowed. And so I think that's really important, that depending what that Christmas party looks like, it may absolutely be able to happen. But the details and the logistics of what a Christmas party in my mind and what a Christmas party you're envisioning look like are going to be really the crux of whether or not it's okay or not.
Christine, can you speak to that in regards to with the state guidance right now? Because I know that this is where some of the confusion becomes for long-term care facilities when we're in the state of flux, when we have the CMS releases guidance and then the state has to review that guidance and then update their guidance accordingly. Can you speak to that in regards to Thanksgiving is 2 days away? What should that look like in Illinois for Thanksgiving gatherings for people?
Sure. So for our current long-term care guidance, and so the updated guidance, the CMS guidance, has been incorporated into the long-term care guidance. It's in draft form and it is going through the approval process, and hopefully that will be available soon. But with that said, our long-term care guidance for the state does include additional congregate care settings. So it includes those settings that are state licensed. in addition to our CMS certified facilities. So with the update and the release of the CMS guidance, our certified facilities are held to that from a regulatory standpoint, whereas currently our licensed facilities are not. But it's good to go ahead and it will apply. So to review that guidance and begin to incorporate it into those other settings. In regard to group activities across settings, it's again, will be pretty consistent. In addition to what Jessica shared, vaccination status is going to play a huge role in considering as well what those group activities will look like. We know with individuals that are vaccinated, the risk of transmission is lower and also severe illness. Our capacity and space within our facilities, again, across settings, will also determine what those activities will look like, with having to incorporate the other infection prevention and control practices. But vaccination status will be huge because it will take away the 6-foot distance and the touching that will be allowed as well in those settings. If you have groups of individuals that are gathering and their status is that they are vaccinated versus having a mixed group of individuals where there are either some vaccinated staff or not, and the same with residents, that will limit the size of those groups and what activities can look like in those settings. So that's another very important piece of it as well.
Well, I know I'm going to get my booster shot this afternoon. And just for people who are not aware about how to go get it, I logged onto Walgreens site and it was very easy. CVS, I know, does the same thing. And, I have a Walgreens right around the corner from me, so I can even walk there. So it's, I think that I'm seeing my mother and other family members, through the course of the next couple of weeks. And so I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to keep myself from being able to keep those that I love healthy. So thank you for that, Christine, and that encouragement to get vaccinated, I think, can be important. So I think one of the things to talk about is the scheduling thing. And Jessica, you brought it up about this guidance that you saw from this other building that was extremely limiting. And if we are told by the long-term care community that I live in or that my loved one lives in, that I can only visit for 15 minutes, for a half hour, and I've got to schedule, not just for Thanksgiving, because I can get it on Thanksgiving because there are so many of us that want to go see our loved ones. But let's say I want to go visit with them on Sunday or Monday of next week, and I start to be told that I need to schedule this, and I can only see my loved one for 30 minutes, and oh well, they don't have any room for me today because everything's booked up. What should I do about that?
Okay, so I would encourage you, I think I mentioned it earlier, to have a copy of the guidance, read the guidance and have a copy of the guidance with you. And I would take it to the facility, or if I'm talking to someone on the phone, I might say, are you aware of the federal guidance that was released on Friday? What was the date? November 12th. I don't remember the date. That was recently released that says that facilities can't limit visitation. And maybe they don't know, they should know, but maybe they don't. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And if they don't know, you can educate them about that guidance, and hopefully that will resolve the issue. If it doesn't, next step, couple things you can do. You could call your ombudsman, talk to your local ombudsman, tell them what's going on, have them work with you to advocate for visitation. In the guidance, the feds did say it's required. And so it may be that you need to make a complaint to the Illinois Department of Public Health. So that would be a step you could take. But before doing that, I always, in a situation like this, I would encourage you to talk to the facility first, to have a conversation saying, I realize it's easier for you if you don't let us come in, but this is what the feds are saying. This is what you're required to allow right now. Help me understand why you're still scheduling visits. And hopefully you'll be met with a, oh, sorry, you can come in Sunday. Hopefully just that conversation alone will be enough when you call them out, because sometimes there are people, and I'm not going to say most facilities because I don't think that's true, but there are people who it's just easier for them if they can control who's coming in and out of the building. So the fact that they've been able to restrict visitors has made it one less thing they have to worry about. So this guidance is going to add stress to the facility staff. They're going to have to figure out how to manage that and continue to keep people safe. So we need to recognize that and try and work with them, but yet stand firm on what the guidance says. And again, call your ombudsman if they don't let you in.
So one of the questions asked is, can you limit where I can visit with my loved ones?
So the guidance does talk specific, let me bring it up so I can look at it. In the indoor visitation section of the guidance, it does talk about that the visit should take place in a resident's room, or let me find it again. I brought it up and now I don't see it right in front of me.
So that's correct. The visit should be restricted to an area, primarily the resident's room or designated location. Now, if a facility is in an outbreak, then that's going to be strictly to the resident's room. But we would not want our visitors kind of freely about in the facility, given that we are in a pandemic and the setting is a vulnerable group of individuals. And so we want to do our best to keep, everyone in that environment safe. And with restricting those visit locations, that will help to contain any potential transmission in that setting.
So what do we do if my loved one has a roommate and I want to visit with my loved one in their room? And even let's say that I know the roommate. My husband's been with the same roommate for a long time, and we've become friends as well. And he'd also like to visit. We'd like, to have coffee together, the three of us. Is that allowable? We might not be family, but we are friends. Is that allowable for two residents and a family member to come and visit together?
No, that's actually discouraged in the current guidance. So visitors that do visit are to visit with their loved one or that individual that they've come to visit with. And it clearly states in the guidance that visitors are not to commingle with other residents and or staff. And so they want to keep that visit contained within that group or one-on-one with that visit resident in that way.
And I think on the call, I think it was last Friday's Q&A call that Public Health does with the for the long-term care facilities. This was discussed, and one of the I don't remember if it was Deb or Karen, but she talked about if a resident can't leave their room. For whatever reason, the residents are both bedbound and share the same room. Those residents still have a right to visitation. And what she talked about was then physical distance, put the curtain up, create that barrier between the residents. If the family member sits at the foot on the other side of the room of their loved one's bed, if their rooms have to be large enough, there's a minimum size of a room to have two people in the room. And so you take almost any facility and the way they're set up, it's possible for a visitor to be 6 feet from the other roommate. And so while it's not ideal, as Christine was saying, I don't want you to walk away thinking, oh, well, my loved one can't leave their room and neither can their roommate, and so I can't visit. Public Health and CMS have approach this with logic and reason and recognize that there are risks, but there's also the importance of that resident still being able to have a visit. I saw a question in here in the chat, and it said should or shall. They mean two different things. So I just want to read under indoor visitation, it says facilities must allow indoor visitation at all times and for all residents is permitted under the regulations. While previously acceptable during the public health emergencies, during the public health emergency, facilities can no longer limit the frequency and length of visits for residents, the number of visitors, or require advanced scheduling of visits. So it's a must, which is a shall. So I just wanted to point that out. And one other question, Lee, I'm not sure if you saw it, but I wanted to jump to it, was about Senate Bill 2137, which amended the Nursing Home Care Act for video visitation. And while video visitation is important and fills a need, the CMS memo is talking about in-person visitation. So it's not acceptable for a facility to say, oh, well, we'll allow you to do a visit over Facebook Live or a Zoom visit in place of an in-person visit if the resident wants an in-person visit.
That's important, I think, for everyone to hear, because we don't want facilities saying that's a visit when it doesn't have the same quality to that visit as being actually together in the same room. Someone else also, we're getting some good suggestions or other insights here on that we're required to visit in a designated area if there's a roommate, because many are medically compromised. And that is where we do have to have that greater understanding. And Christine, thank you for bringing that. You know, we do have people that are, people don't go to nursing homes because they're healthy. They go to nursing homes primarily because they need care and they need nursing attention. And so we have to be understanding that even while my loved one may be there because they had a surgical procedure, someone else may be there because they have a much more medically compromised condition than I have. And being astutely aware of that, I think as we're walking through the hallways, I know it's been brought to our attention to make sure that you go from that front door, you don't stop and you go right to your loved one's room. You don't want to stop in to go see somebody else and go visit with other people. We have to be cognizant of that and making sure all those infection prevention things are in place. And then someone else has also made the comment to us that the booster shots are also readily available at Walmart, which is another really great resource to be able to go, and really wanting to encourage people. Like Jessica mentioned, people are eligible. We're all eligible for the most part right now to be getting that booster shot. So I think it's important. Something else just came in and it says the elimination of vaccine requirements is scary. Nursing homes have been on the spotlight for high COVID numbers. How then are they going to apply infection control if visitors are not vaccinated? In the end, it's residents. I lost that. Nursing homes have been on the spotlight. It's not letting me go now.
It's residents who get COVID again, and it spreads like fire once in a congregate care setting, I think is what the person's saying.
And I do know I was on a call 2 weeks ago with, and some residents were on in that meeting as well. And they did make a really good point about this mandated vaccinations that are happening for staff. Just saying about that this individual said they lost 30 people. Through the course, that some people that they cared about through the course of the pandemic, between other people that lived in the nursing home that they lived in, between people that they knew that lived out in the community. And so it was and this person started crying, sharing this story and saying how important it is that everybody understands that need for that vaccination, because it's me who could be the next one that dies if somebody chooses not to get vaccinated and then come and see me or see somebody else who lives in my nursing home, where we do all have that right, but you got to think about what it is, what our actions are, and the impact that they are having on other people. I am seeing that there's some other.
I think a piece to that, though, is to remember that the vaccination, the level of vaccination for residents is it's high. And so the residents, they are getting that protection that wasn't available to them a year ago, again, which I think if you read the guidance in that paragraph explaining why CMS is shifting their stance on visitation, I think it speaks to what that question is. And it is scary. And a couple things to keep in mind: if a resident doesn't want to have visitors who aren't vaccinated, a resident has a right to choose who they want to visit with. So if a resident doesn't want to see someone, they don't have to visit with someone they don't want to see. At the same time, if they do want to visit with their loved one, they have that right as well. We have the added protection of masking that's important, and all visitors, vaccinated or unvaccinated, are going to be wearing masks while they're in the building. So it's not a free for all. It might feel like it, right? Because we are not at the end, and we all want to be at the end of this craziness. But there are protections, the physical distancing, that piece of, that's why you go straight to the room of your loved one and don't meander around the facility, because again, we're trying to protect everybody there.
So there's a question about friends can visit, not just family. Correct? Is that a correct statement, Christine, Jessica?
Yes, that's up to the resident. There's no restriction on who those individuals can or cannot be. If the resident is fine with that person that's visiting, then it's their right. So these, I guess we have to look at our residents in these settings in terms of, I mean, these facilities are essentially their homes. And if they were still in their homes, they would have visitors and individuals visiting with them. And that's the updated guidance is really supporting that and acknowledging the rights of our residents. You know, unfortunately, they are in skilled facilities, but yet these are their homes. And so we want to remove a lot of those restrictions that were in place initially when a lot was not known about the virus with regard to transmission. Now that we know more, we can remove a lot of those restrictions and allow those rights to come back into play. But yes, that will be totally up to the resident. It could be a loved one or a friend.
Okay. Are there any limitations on the number of visitors that can be there at the same time?
There is not. However, facilities do have a responsibility to adhere to guidance and the regulatory requirements with regard to being compliant with the infection prevention and control practices, i.e. 6-foot distancing. So based on the size of their facility and how many individuals they can hold within their physical space will determine that. However, in general, there's not a limit. Facilities may, you know, have to get creative with managing that if they're expecting kind of an influx, or there's maybe a large visiting group for one resident at one given time. So maybe that would require rotating those visitors in and out again. So if they are adhering to those regulatory and core infection prevention and control guidance.
Is there an age limit? That's one of the questions in the chat for visitors. There have been some places that we've heard about that are not allowing children.
Currently, to my knowledge, there's nothing written around age limitations. We do see that in acute care. In our long-term care setting, there's nothing written currently that requires a age limitation on visitors.
And I know it was also brought up about on the call last Friday, the questions asking about animals coming to visit. Can animals come to visit the facilities right now? I think they had said that they
said
could.
yes.
Yeah, last Friday they had said that animals can come to visit. So that dog that someone might not have been able to see in quite a while, it's typically the animal that we see that comes to visit. It's more difficult to get a cat to be able to do something along those lines, or a bird or any of that stuff. But they did say that pets can come, which is it is nice to hear that people can start seeing them.
And facilities should follow whatever their policy is for pets coming into the facility. So it's not like it's not a free for all,
Yeah,
right?
and
Like the pets need to be vaccinated, you know, not COVID vaccinated, but be up to date on their shots and those types of things, just like they would have 3 years ago before we were dealing with any of this pandemic mess.
Yes, I think that's a really important to know. And I know I would always recommend to people, just bring it with you just in case. Because the last thing you want to do then is to get the person excited that they're going to get to see the animal and then you didn't bring the paper with you. So I just think that's a nice, easy thing to be able to do. Someone also made a comment about people should remember that you can get sick, whether or not you've been vaccinated, so use your common sense. But that subject has been beaten down enough, and residents and their families just want to know that they can see their loved one, which is absolutely so true. But we also have to remember that it is flu season.
Right.
And when I get my booster today, I'm also getting my flu shot. I'm gonna double up here. And, I think that is important. And I just want to reiterate that it is important that if you're feeling any sort of symptom, just if you're feeling a little different, a little funky, but don't use that as the opportunity to go visit somebody, because you never know if something could be brewing in your system. And even if it is a bad cold, we do have a vulnerable population that lives in the long-term care facilities. And we want to make sure that we're trying to do whatever we can to keep any sorts of infection away from them, not just COVID. So it's not always going to be COVID. I know I'm the person who, the second I get a cough or I feel a little ache, I'm like, do I have COVID? And I go and I get tested. But that's just because I'm trying to be precautionary around my 87-year-old mother. But do be mindful of that, that we're not just talking about COVID here. Well, this has become a topic for us to become much more astutely aware about infection control practices in long-term care. It's also a great education opportunity for all of us to really understand how we can be carriers for a lot of different other sicknesses and illnesses that we could be giving to our loved one as we go to visit them. One of the things I want to make everyone aware of is all the links that I've put into the chat today will go onto our Facebook page. So we'll have all of that on our Facebook page. It's very easy. Just do a search for the Illinois Ombudsman, Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and you'll be able to find that on Facebook. Make sure you like it. We're looking at our likes, and we want to make sure that we're getting out to as many people as possible. We're trying to put information on that Facebook page that's pertinent to you. Like this, when we had that, the visitation policy from CMS was released, we put that up there. That way, then you'll have links to all of this information readily at your hands. So even if you're at the facility, you didn't have a copy of the document with you, and they're questioning you about vaccination, you can log on to our Facebook page and be able to get to it right from the Facebook page and show it on your phone. So know that's it's a nice tactic for you to be able to use as well. The Facebook page is a question. Just Google it. Not Google it, but I guess go into Facebook and do a search for the Illinois Ombudsman, Illinois Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and it should come right up. You should be able to see it. And so I don't know if there's a link to that on our website either. I have to check into that.
So with that, Lee's actually the one putting content on our Facebook page right now. So as soon as she's aware that new IDPH guidance has dropped, I can assure you that she is going to get that pushed out. So that's another place where, if it comes tonight or tomorrow, when we are made aware that it's dropped, that we will make sure to try and share it there as well. So that would be a place that you can kind of look for to see. And you can always go to IDPH's, I Google Illinois Long-Term Care Facility COVID, I think, or IDPH Long-Term Care Facility COVID is what I Google. And IDPH, when they push out new guidance, usually very quickly thereafter, they will have the new version of the guidance posted on their website. They replace one with the other. Oh, good. Stephen dropped the link to our Facebook page in the chat there. So
thank you, Stephen.
Hopefully you can. It's not easy. We got a question mark and a whole lot of numbers, but hopefully you can copy that down here.
And what I'm going to do too is I'm going to launch the poll while I'm making a couple of, if you could please just answer this question. It's helpful for us to be able to know if these meetings are important or beneficial for people. We also are recording these, so know that we have a YouTube channel as well, and I believe you can even you can access the YouTube channel through the Facebook. I'm not sure if you can do that or not, but again, if you Google that, and I don't know if Stephen can work his magic and put a link in for that as well, that would be really great. But we do have a YouTube page where these meetings are, the recordings of them are going onto that page. And our website has a link to those, as well as up to the videos, as well as we also post the slides for each presentation as well. So we understand that this week, being a week of people traveling, that we didn't have as many people on, but that's why this video was really important. So you can forward this to other people so that they can be fully aware of what should be going on in the long-term care world regarding visitation. So thank you, everybody. With that, I'm right now going to end the recording. And
Hey, Lee,
yes.
I found the YouTube channel and I put the link in the chat box.
Thank you so much. You're great, Stephen. Thank you so
I
much.
know.
You are. So I will. I'm going to end the recording right now.